Sunby was the kind of man who didn't knock on doors. He owned the buildings they belonged to. I was just Sheila, the quiet data analyst in 14C who paid her rent on time and asked her landlord nothing. But at midnight, he didn't go to his penthouse. Bleeding through a ruined dress shirt, reeking of whiskey, the most powerful man in the city collapsed against my door. I have never been the girl men notice. I've spent 26 years perfecting the art of disappearing. Cardigans 2 sizes too big, a desk in the back corner, a voice I keep low enough that no one ever asks me to repeat myself. I am soft in a city that worships sharp edges. My thighs press together when I sit. My stomach folds when I laugh, so I've learned not to laugh too loud. Men don't show up at my door in the middle of the night. They certainly don't bleed on it. So when the pounding started, frantic, heavy, a fist that sounded like it belonged to something dying, I told myself to stay still. Let it pass. Let it be someone else's emergency. It pounded again. I checked the peephole, and my stomach dropped straight through the floor. Sunby, my landlord, though that word had never fit him. Landlords didn't have knuckles scarred like that, didn't wear suits that cost more than my yearly salary, didn't have a reputation that made grown men cross the street. I'd seen him twice in the lobby. Both times he'd looked at me like he was memorizing something. I opened the door an inch, just enough to ask if he was okay. It was enough. His hand hit the wood above my head, and the door swung wide. And then he was in, filling the frame, filling the hallway, filling all the air I had left. Blood soaked through white cotton, dark patterns blooming across tattoos I'd never been close enough to read. Up close he smelled like top-shelf bourbon and copper and something underneath that I couldn't name. His palm found my jaw. Rough, careful, like he was holding something he'd already decided he couldn't afford to break. Sheila. My name in his mouth sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone he'd been carrying for a long time. He leaned in until his forehead nearly touched mine, dark eyes holding mine with a focus that had no business existing on a man bleeding out in my doorway. I want you. I shouldn't be able to move him, not a man his size, but fear is its own kind of strength. I got his arm over my shoulders and half dragged, half walked him down the hall to my bathroom, his blood smearing the wall in a long, dark streak I knew I'd see every time I closed my eyes for weeks. Sit, I said, and somehow he listened, folding his massive frame onto the edge of my tub like it was something he'd been told to do his whole life and never once obeyed until now. My hands shook peeling his shirt away from the wound. High on his side, just below the ribs, not the kill shot, but close enough that the white tile was already freckled red. I'd taken a first aid course years ago for a job I no longer remembered. None of it had prepared me for this. For him. For the way his stomach tightened under my fingers, muscle and ink and old scars layered like a map of every bad night that had come before this one. This is going to hurt, I told him, soaking a cloth in antiseptic. Everything already does. His voice had gone quieter. Less performance in it now, less whiskey-soaked theater. Just a man, tired down to the bone. I pressed the cloth to the wound and he hissed through his teeth, head tipping back against the tile, throat exposed, and I made myself focus on the bleeding and not on how close I was standing, how his knee pressed warm against the inside of my thigh, how his hand had found my hip like he needed something solid to hold on to. Who did this to you? A long silence. Long enough that I thought he wouldn't answer. Dmitri. The name came out flat, final, like a door closing. My underboss. 10 years I trusted that man with my back, my books, my life. His jaw worked. Tonight he put 3 men outside my own restaurant and told them to make sure I didn't walk out of it. My hands stilled over the gauze. And you came here. To me. You're the only person in this city who doesn't want anything from me. He caught my wrist. Not hard, just enough to make me look at him. I've watched you for months, Sheila. The way you keep your head down on the elevator. The way you tip the doorman even when he doesn't see you do it. His thumb moved once over my pulse. I didn't know where else was safe. I'm not even sure this is. I taped the gauze down with hands that had finally stopped shaking, mostly. Nowhere safe if Dmitri sent men to kill you. No, he agreed quietly. But you opened the door anyway. I didn't have an answer for that. I just reached for the wrap to bind his ribs and let the silence between us say what I wasn't ready to. Morning light came in gray and reluctant, and I found Sunby sitting at my kitchen table like he belonged there, shirt off, bandages stark white against ink and bruised skin, scrolling through a phone that wasn't his. "You audited the Hartwell Marsh shipping contracts 3 weeks ago," he said, not looking up. "Flagged a route through the Port Authority warehouses as inefficient." My coffee mug stopped halfway to my mouth. "How do you know that?" "Because that route isn't inefficient. It's how Dimitri and your executive director have been moving product through your company's own logistics network for the better part of a year." He finally looked up, and there was something almost gentle in the way he said it, like he was sorry to be the one handing me this. "You didn't find a clerical error, Sheila. You found their supply chain." The mug felt suddenly very heavy. That audit was routine. Nobody even read past the summary page. Somebody did. His jaw tightened. "And now they think you're a liability they can't afford." I opened my mouth to ask what that meant. Exactly, in numbers I could understand. Fired, sued. What? When the balcony exploded inward. Glass didn't just break, it detonated, a hailstorm of it across my living room. And Sunby was moving before I'd even processed the sound. A gun appearing from somewhere I hadn't seen, his body suddenly between me and the gaping black hole where my window used to be. "Down," he said, and shoved me behind the kitchen island a half-second before the first shots came through what was left of the doorframe. The noise was enormous. Wrong. Nothing in my life had prepared me for the sound of bullets eating through drywall 6 feet from my head, for the way Sunby returned fire with a calm that terrified me more than the gunman did. 2 shots and a man went down past the broken glass. 3 more and the apartment went briefly, horribly silent. "Move." He hauled me up by the arm, glass crunching under my bare feet, and I didn't have time to feel it cut me. We went for the service stairwell, him shielding my body with his the entire way down 4 flights, his hand fisted in the back of my cardigan like he could physically will me to safety. A black SUV idled at the curb that hadn't been there last night. He shoved me into the passenger seat, vaulted into the driver's side still bleeding through fresh bandages, and pulled into traffic like the city itself was on fire behind us. "Where are we going?" I asked, voice shaking, glass still in my hair. "Somewhere they don't know exists," he said. "Somewhere you can finally be safe." I didn't believe him, but I didn't have anywhere else to go. We drove for almost 2 hours before the city fell away behind us, replaced by winding coastal road and the gray glitter of the ocean through the trees. The house, when we finally reached it, sat low and fortified against a cliffside, all concrete and glass and steel shutters, the kind of place built by someone who'd spent a lifetime expecting to be hunted. "No one knows about this place," Sunby said, killing the engine. "Not Dimitri. Not anyone." Inside, the silence felt strange after the violence of the morning. Vast rooms, a wall of windows facing nothing but water, furniture that looked untouched. He moved through it like a man returning to a body he'd left somewhere else, and it wasn't until he sat heavily on the edge of the bed that I noticed the dark bloom spreading through his shirt again. "Your stitches tore." I was already moving for the first aid kit I'd seen in the bathroom. "It's fine." "It's not fine. You're bleeding through cotton." I knelt in front of him, peeling the ruined bandage away, and the wound underneath had reopened along one edge, angry and raw. My hands had stopped shaking sometime in the last hour, which felt like its own small victory. He watched me work in silence for a while, and then, quietly, "You keep pulling your sleeves down." Even now, I froze, needle and thread halfway through the first stitch. "What?" "Your cardigan. Every time it slips, you fix it. Like you're afraid of what happens if it doesn't." His hand came up, slow, and caught my wrist before I could pull away out of habit. "Why?" "Because I know what I look like." The words came out sharper than I meant them to, raw in a way I hadn't planned on. "I don't need you to pretend you don't notice. I notice everything about you." His thumb traced once over the inside of my wrist. "I noticed you in the lobby 8 months ago, in a green dress you clearly didn't want to wear, arms crossed over yourself like you were trying to disappear into the marble." His eyes didn't leave mine. "I've thought about you nearly every day since." "You don't have to say that. I'm not in the habit of saying things I don't mean." He reached up, slow enough that I could have stopped him, and pushed the cardigan off one shoulder. I let him. "This," his hand spread warm against my bare arm, over the softness there I'd spent a lifetime apologizing for, "is not something you hide from me. Not here." I should have pulled away. Instead, I finished the last stitch with hands that had gone unsteady for an entirely different reason. And when I looked up, he was still watching me with that same terrifying focus from the doorway last night, like I was the only fixed point in a world that kept trying to kill him. "You're going to get me killed, looking at me like that?" I whispered. "No," he said. "I'm going to make sure nothing ever touches you again." Outside, the ocean kept breaking against the rocks, indifferent to either promise. I found the remote on the second morning, restless and unable to sleep past 5, and turned the television on low so I wouldn't wake him. I wasn't looking for anything. I just wanted noise that wasn't the ocean or the sound of my own thoughts circling the same drain. My face filled the screen before the anchor even finished her sentence. It was my company headshot, the one from 3 years ago that I'd always hated, blown up behind a banner that read Federal Investigation. Data analyst linked to international smuggling ring. My coffee mug slipped from my fingers and shattered against the concrete floor, and the sound brought Son B out of the bedroom in seconds, shirtless, gun already in hand before he registered there was no threat in the room except the one on the screen. Authorities allege Sheila Marsh used her position at Hartwell Marsh Logistics to orchestrate a sophisticated smuggling operation valued at upwards of $40 million. The anchor was saying, calm and bright, and utterly indifferent to the way my entire life had just folded in on itself. Marsh has not been seen since federal agents attempted to execute a search warrant at her residence yesterday evening. That's not. My voice didn't sound like mine. I didn't do any of this. I flagged a route. That's all I did. I flagged a route on a Tuesday afternoon because the numbers didn't reconcile. I know. Son Bea's hand found my shoulder, steady where I was not. They're going to arrest me. They think I'm. The shape of it finally landed. All at once. The way a wave finally breaks after you've watched it building for a long time. He did this. Marcus did this. My executive director, who'd brought me coffee on bad days, who'd recommended me for the promotion I never got. He needed someone to take the fall, and I was sitting right there with my name on the audit trail. Sheila. I trusted him. The words came out smaller than I meant them to, the old shrinking instinct trying to reclaim me even now. I've spent 6 years being invisible so nobody would have a reason to hurt me, and it didn't matter. He didn't even have to look at me to destroy my life. Look at me. Son B turned me by the shoulders, forced me to meet eyes that had gone hard with something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief. They built a case out of paperwork you didn't even know was a weapon. That's not a confession. That's a frame, and frames can be taken apart. His thumb brushed once beneath my eye, catching something I hadn't realized had fallen. You are not disappearing again. Not for them. Not for anyone. On the screen, my photograph lingered a moment longer before cutting to footage of agents outside my building. My whole carefully invisible life turned into a 15-second segment between weather and sports. Then tell me what to do, I said, because hiding clearly isn't an option anymore. For the first time since the bullets came through my window, something that looked almost like a plan moved behind his eyes. I need my laptop, I said, already moving toward the bag I'd grabbed in the chaos of leaving my apartment, the one I hadn't even thought to question packing. The real one, not the work-issued one they can track. Son B raised an eyebrow, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, bandages stark against his chest. You ran from gunfire and remembered to grab a laptop. I ran from gunfire and remembered to grab the only thing that might actually save my life. I pulled it free and set it on the kitchen counter, hands moving with a steadiness that surprised even me. This, at least, was a language I understood better than fear. 3 weeks ago, when the audit didn't reconcile, I didn't just flag it. I mirrored the entire primary server architecture to an encrypted personal drive. I do it with every irregular dataset. Habit. In case IT tries to tell me I imagined a discrepancy. You stole their servers. I backed up evidence I didn't know was evidence yet. I powered the laptop on, watched the login screen bloom blue in the dim kitchen light. Marcus thinks he buried this. He doesn't know I'm sitting on a complete shadow copy of every phantom route, every falsified manifest, every account they laundered through customs categories that don't even exist. Something shifted in Son Bea's expression, not surprise exactly, more like recalibration, like he was seeing the shape of me differently for the first time. You could have led with this an hour ago. I needed to be sure I could trust the person standing next to me with it. I looked up at him. I'm sure now. He didn't say anything to that, just pulled out the chair beside me and sat, close enough that his shoulder brushed mine while I worked, and for the first time since the gunfire, I felt something other than fear settle into my chest. It took 6 hours to get through the first layer of encryption Marcus had added after I disappeared, sloppy and rushed, the kind of security thrown up by someone who knew exactly how much he had to lose. I found the offshore accounts first, then the shipping manifests that didn't correspond to any cargo that had ever existed. Then, finally, a name I didn't expect threaded through the transaction logs like a signature he hadn't bothered to hide. Dmitri. He's not just protecting your boss's smuggling operation, I said slowly, the pieces sliding together with a click that felt almost physical. He's laundering through it. Every account here traces back to accounts Dmitri controls. Marcus didn't betray your organization on his own. They built this together. Sun B went very still beside me. Show me. I turned the screen toward him and watched his jaw tighten as he read. Watched 10 years of trust finish unraveling in real time across a spreadsheet I'd built out of stubbornness and a habit of not believing what people told her. They thought they buried this with you missing and me dead, he said quietly. They didn't account for either of us surviving the night. Then let's make sure they regret that. I pulled up a blank terminal window, fingers hovering over the keys. Because I'm done being the woman they erase from a headline. We worked in shifts that bled into each other. Days marked only by the changing light over the water and the slow accumulation of evidence stacking itself into something undeniable. Sunby brought me coffee at hours I'd stopped tracking, made calls in low, clipped tones to people whose names he never said in front of me, and somewhere in the blur of it, the space between us stopped feeling like distance and started feeling like gravity. You're doing that thing again, he said one night, watching me from across the kitchen table while I traced a transaction through 4 shell accounts and a customs loophole wide enough to drive a freighter through. What thing? Forgetting to be afraid of yourself. He nodded at the screen, at my hands moving fast and certain over the keys. You disappear into it. The numbers. It's the only time I've seen you stop trying to take up less space. I didn't look up, mostly because I didn't trust my face not to give away how much that had landed. It's just math. It's not just math, Sheila. You're rebuilding an entire criminal financial network from a server mirror and a headache, alone, while the government thinks you're hiding in Mexico. That's not math. That's brilliance. And you talk about it like it's nothing because you've spent your whole life being told the rest of you was the only thing worth noticing. My hands stilled on the keyboard. You don't know that. I know you apologize for taking the last seat on a bus that's half empty. I know you ordered a salad in front of me at that diner 2 towns over, and then ate half of my fries when you thought I wasn't looking, like you needed permission for both. He stood, came around the table slow, the way he always moved when he wanted me to know I had time to stop him. I know exactly what kind of mind it takes to do what you just did. It's the same mind I've been obsessed with since the lobby. The body was never separate from that, for me. It was never the point you seem to think it was. Then what was the point? My voice came out smaller than I wanted. You. He crouched in front of my chair until we were level, his hands settling over mine on the keyboard, warm and certain. All of you. The softness you keep apologizing for. The mind that just took apart a smuggling ring with a laptop and spite. The woman who opened a door for a bleeding stranger because some instinct in her said help him instead of protect yourself. His thumb moved over my knuckles. I have spent months wanting you, and I have spent 4 days respecting you. And I am telling you, the second one terrifies me more. I didn't have an answer that wouldn't break my voice, so I didn't try to find one. I just turned my hand over beneath his, palm to palm, and let it say the thing I wasn't ready to say out loud. Outside, the tide kept turning over itself in the dark, patient, the way certain things are when they already know how the story ends. The final firewall took 11 hours and broke at 3 a.m., the way these things always seem to, too tired to celebrate, too wired to sleep. I stared at the screen until the numbers stopped swimming and resolved into something final. Got it. My voice came out hoarse from disuse. Dimitri's been routing the laundered funds through a shell logistics company registered to his cousin. 41 million, give or take, sitting in 4 accounts that all trace back to him directly. Not Marcus. Not the syndicate's general treasury. Him. Sunby came to stand behind my chair, reading over my shoulder, and I felt the shift in him before he said anything. A stillness settling into his shoulders that I'd learned meant something dangerous was being decided. He didn't just betray me for power, he said quietly. He's been bleeding my organization dry for himself this entire time, using your company's logistics network as his personal laundromat. There's a transfer scheduled for tomorrow night. I pulled up the manifest, hands finally steady after 4 days of practice. Warehouse 7, the shipping docks. They're moving the last of the physical product before they liquidate everything digital and disappear. If he gets that shipment out, the accounts go dark and the evidence trail dies with it. Then it ends tomorrow night. He was already moving, already reaching for his phone, and within the hour the quiet sanctuary had filled with the low murmur of men arriving in dark cars. Men who looked at me with a wary respect I'd never been given by anyone in a boardroom. "You're not going," Sunby said, not looking up from the table where he was laying out a floor plan of the docks with the casual fluency of a man who'd planned violence before breakfast more than once. "Excuse me. It's not a debate, Sheila. It's a warehouse full of armed men, and it's my evidence." I planted both hands on the table, leaned into the space he usually used to make other people smaller. "I am the only person who can verify those accounts in real time, trace the transfer the moment it executes, and route it somewhere they can't claw it back from. You need me in that warehouse, not safely tucked away pretending I'm still the woman who apologizes for taking up a seat on the bus." He straightened, studying me with an expression I was starting to recognize, the one that meant he was losing an argument and deciding how much he minded. "If anything happens to you, then it happens to me making my own choice, for once, instead of having my whole life decided by men who think I'm too soft to matter." I held his gaze and didn't look away. I spent 6 years hiding so nothing could touch me. It found me anyway. I'm done hiding. Something in his face cracked open, equal parts fear and a fierce, unwilling pride. "Fine." He turned back to the floor plan, voice rougher than before. "But you stay behind cover until I tell you the room is clear. That's not me doubting you. That's me asking you to let me keep you alive long enough to watch you win this." I nodded, and for the first time since the gunfire, the fear in my chest felt like fuel instead of weight. Rain came down in sheets over the docks, hammering the corrugated roof of Warehouse 7 until it sounded like static, like the world itself was holding its breath. I crouched behind a stack of shipping containers with a laptop wrapped in plastic against the wet, and a comm unit tucked into my ear, watching Sunby's men fan out through the shadows in formations they'd clearly run 100 times before. Dimitri stood at the center of the warehouse floor under a single hanging work light, flanked by men loading the last pallets into a freight container. Marcus beside him in a suit that looked obscene against the rust and rain. My old executive director, the man who'd brought me coffee on bad days, calmly orchestrating the end of my old life. "Transfer initiates in 4 minutes. I murmured into the calm. "Copy." Sunby's voice, low and steady, somewhere in the dark above the catwalks. "Wait for my signal." The signal, when it came, was gunfire, controlled, precise, his men dropping into the warehouse from 3 directions at once while Dimitri's people scrambled for cover that didn't exist. I kept my eyes on the screen, on the 4 accounts blinking green and waiting, my fingers steady despite the chaos exploding 20 feet away. The transfer executed at 11:58. I didn't wait. I drove the intercept the second the funds moved, watching $41 million try to vanish into an account in the Caymans before I rerouted it through 3 jurisdictions and froze it solid. Locked behind a federal flag, I queued up 6 hours earlier with a contact at the SEC who owed my old department a favor she didn't know she'd be calling in tonight. "It's done," I said. "The accounts are frozen. The data's already with the feds, manifests, transaction logs, everything." Across the warehouse, Dimitri's head snapped toward the sound of my voice through the rain, and something in me, some old, small, hiding instinct, told me to stay in the shadows where it was safe. I stood up instead. I walked out from behind the containers into the worklight's reach, soaked through, cardigan plastered to skin I'd spent a lifetime apologizing for, and let every one of them see exactly who had taken their empire apart from a laptop on a kitchen table. "You," Marcus said, And for the first time in 6 years, he looked at me like I was something to fear instead of something to overlook. Me? My voice didn't shake. Your accounts are frozen, Marcus. The shipment's flagged. Federal agents are already pulling the warrant on Warehouse 7 right now. There's no version of tonight where you walk out of this. Dimitri's hand moved toward his weapon, and Sunby was already there, stepping out of the dark behind him with a gun pressed flat against his spine before the motion finished. 10 years, Sunby said quietly. And you thought I wouldn't notice you stealing from me twice. The shot that followed was the last sound of the night that mattered. I didn't look away from it. I'd spent too long looking away from things. When it was over, Sunby crossed the warehouse floor through the rain and the wreckage, and didn't stop until his hands were on my face, like he needed to confirm I was real. You're shaking, he said. I'm still standing, I said. That's new. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of Sunby's penthouse in a dress the color of deep wine, cut close through the body I used to spend entire mornings trying to disguise, and watched the city glitter out past the rail like it had always belonged to me too. The federal case had closed in April. Marcus took a plea that put him away for the better part of 2 decades, and the records, my real records, the ones I'd mirrored at a kitchen counter while bleeding out fear instead of blood, had done exactly what I'd hoped. My name didn't just get cleared. It became something else entirely. The analyst who'd single-handedly dismantled a $41 million smuggling operation from a beach house with a stolen laptop. 3 firms had tried to recruit me in the weeks after. I'd turned them all down. I ran logistics now, real logistics, the kind that moved goods and reputations and a small empire's worth of legitimate shipping contracts, the kind that didn't ask me to apologize for taking up space in the room where decisions got made. Sunby's organization had gone quieter since Dimitri, leaner, more careful about what it touched, and I'd had a hand in most of that, too. Nobody called me a liability anymore. They called me before they made a move. You're doing it again, Sunby said behind me, low, amused, his voice closer than I'd realized. Doing what? Standing like you dare the wind to find something to criticize. His arms came around me from behind, settling at my waist. No hesitation in the way his hands found the soft curve of it, like there'd never been a single day he'd wanted me to be anything other than exactly this. Half a year, and you still don't know how dangerous you look right now. I know exactly how I look. I leaned back into him, into the solid warmth of a man who'd shown up bleeding at my door and never once asked me to be smaller for it. I picked this dress on purpose. I noticed. His mouth found my shoulder, the bare skin of it. No cardigan left to hide behind. Not tonight. Not most nights anymore. I noticed everyone downstairs noticing too. Does that bother you? It would have once. He turned me to face him, dark eyes holding mine with the same unshaken focus from that first terrible, beautiful night. Now I just think they're finally seeing what I saw 8 months ago in a lobby, in a dress you hated, looking like you wanted to disappear. His hand came up to my jaw, gentler now than that first night, but with the same certainty underneath it. You never have to disappear again. Not for them. Not for anyone. Below us, the city kept moving the way it always had, indifferent and glittering and entirely unaware of how close it had come to losing both of us. I didn't feel the old urge to shrink from any of it. I felt, for the first time in my life, exactly the right size for the space I was standing in. Stay, he said, like it was a question he already knew the answer to. I'm not going anywhere, I said. I finally found the one place I don't have to hide. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our channel if you enjoyed this story.